I was dying, and the man holding my chart told me to just take an aspirin. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks was the most brilliant, arrogant alpha in Seattle. He dismissed my agony as mere omega hysterics until the blood work proved the fatal bond sickness killing me was caused by him. The relentless Seattle rain beating against the windows of my Uber felt like a physical manifestation of the pounding in my skull. I leaned my head against the cold glass, shivering violently, despite the thick wool sweater wrapped around my frame. For the past 3 months, my body had been waging a war against itself. It started as a dull, persistent ache in the scent glands at the base of my neck and steadily spiraled into agonizing joint pain, chronic fatigue, and unexplainable high-grade fevers. I was an omega in the prime of my life, a senior graphic designer at Slalom Consulting downtown, but lately I could barely muster the energy to open my MacBook. Everything hurt. Deep in my chest there was a hollow, tearing sensation, like an invisible thread had been violently snapped, leaving the frayed ends to rot inside me. The driver pulled up to the imposing glass and steel facade of Harborview Medical Center. I paid tipped generously out of a desperate need for some good karma and dragged myself through the sliding doors. I was here to see Dr. Nathaniel Brooks. He was the Pacific Northwest's leading specialist in alpha-omega endocrinology. Getting an appointment took weeks of begging and a cancelled slot. But I was desperate. My primary care physician had thrown his hands up, baffled by my plummeting white blood cell count and the erratic spiking of my distress pheromones. The waiting room of the advanced endocrinology wing smelled of industrial bleach and sterile linen, a scent designed to neutralize any lingering biological odors. Still, my hypersensitive omega nose twitched. Beneath the chemical cleanliness, the air was thick with the latent suffocating pressure of dominant alphas. "Mr. Rossi," a nurse called out. I stood my knees buckling slightly and followed her into examination room 4. I waited for another 20 minutes, clutching the crinkling paper of the exam table. When the door finally opened, it didn't just swing it commanded attention. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks stepped in, and the sheer density of his alpha presence immediately pressed against the walls of the small room. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit beneath a pristine white lab coat. His jawline was sharp enough to cut glass, his dark hair flawlessly styled, but it was his eyes that made my breath catch a piercing analytical ice blue that looked at me not as a person, but as a mildly annoying puzzle on his clipboard. He didn't offer his hand. He merely tapped his pen against his iPad. Oliver Rossi, 27. Unbonded omega. You've been complaining of fatigue, glandular swelling, and joint pain for 12 weeks. His voice was a rich, deep baritone, but it was utterly devoid of empathy. It's more than just complaining, doctor. I managed to say, my voice trembling. I can barely walk to my kitchen without feeling like my bones are filled with lead. My scent has completely soured. Look. I tilted my neck, pulling down the collar of my sweater to reveal the angry, bruised-looking inflammation around my scent gland. Dr. Brooks barely glanced up from his screen. He stepped closer, and a faint, crisp scent of winter pine and vetiver washed over me. For a split second, a bizarre jolt of electricity shot down my spine, a ghost of a memory I couldn't quite place. My inner omega whimpered, a confusing mix of relief and profound sorrow. He shined a penlight into my eyes, then briefly pressed 2 gloved fingers against my neck. His touch was clinical, painfully brief. As soon as he pulled away, the tearing sensation in my chest flared with vengeance. I gasped, clutching my sternum. "Dramatic," Dr. Brooks muttered under his breath, tossing the gloves into the biohazard bin. "Mr. Rossi, I see cases like yours 5 times a day. You are an unbonded omega, approaching your late 20s. Your biological clock is ticking. Your hormones are fluctuating wildly in response to a lack of an alpha mate, and you are experiencing severe psychosomatic stress. Simply put, it's preheat anxiety, compounded by a demanding corporate lifestyle. Psychosomatic. I stared at him, outrage temporarily overriding my exhaustion. Dr. Brooks, my fever was 102 degrees yesterday. I am losing weight. I woke up in the middle of the night, coughing up blood-tinged mucus. This isn't just in my head. My primary doctor thought it could be an autoimmune rejection or bond sickness. Dr. Brooks stopped typing. He turned to me, his icy eyes narrowing with arrogant condescension. Bond sickness, Mr. Rossi. You are officially unbonded. There is no bite mark on your gland. Bond sickness occurs when a mated pair is forcibly separated or a mate dies. You cannot suffer from a severed bond if you don't have one. I know the textbook definition. I snapped, my frustration boiling over. But something is wrong with me. 6 months ago, I was at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel for a masquerade charity gala. I went into an unexpected suppressed heat. I was with an alpha. It was dark. I was delirious. I never saw his face, and he was gone when I woke up. He didn't bite me, but he scent-marked me heavily. Ever since then, my body has been deteriorating. Dr. Brooks sighed, the sound heavy with the impatience of a genius forced to deal with an idiot. A one-night stand at the Fairmont does not equate to a biological mate bond, Mr. Rossi. You experienced a severe hormonal dump. Your body is struggling to recalibrate. I am prescribing you a high-dosage course of Pfizer's synthetic omegastrol suppressants and a mild anti-anxiety medication. Take ibuprofen for the fever. Drink chamomile tea. Get some sleep. You're not listening to me, I pleaded, tears of pure frustration pricking my eyes. The suppressants don't work. They make the pain worse. Please run a comprehensive pheromone binding panel. Just check. He opened the door, his posture rigid. I am the head of this department, Mr. Rossi. I do not order thousands of dollars in unnecessary immunological panels to humor an Omega's romanticized heartbreak over an anonymous one-night stand. Take the prescription to the pharmacy on the first floor. Good day. The door clicked shut. I was left alone on the crinkling paper, shivering, dismissed, and utterly terrified that I was going to die. 2 weeks later, Dr. Brooks's arrogant diagnosis nearly cost me my life. I had tried to follow his orders. I picked up the heavy-duty Pfizer suppressants and swallowed them every morning with my bitter black coffee. Just as I had warned him, the medication felt like drinking liquid fire. Instead of soothing my inflamed glands, the synthetic hormones violently clashed with whatever was destroying me from the inside. The hollow ache in my chest grew teeth gnawing at my ribs until breathing became a conscious, excruciating effort. It happened on a Tuesday. We were in the middle of a massive pitch for a new tech client at Slalom Consulting. I was standing at the head of the glass-walled conference room, holding a laser pointer. My hands shaking so violently, I had to grip the edge of the mahogany table to steady myself. My coworker Liam kept shooting me worried glances. I was sweating through my dress shirt, my vision swimming in dark, fuzzy spots. And as you can see from the user interface, I started, but my voice sounded distant, like I was speaking underwater. Suddenly, a wave of agony so intense it whited out my vision, ripped through my chest. My inner Omega let out a silent, agonizing scream of pure abandonment. My knees simply vanished beneath me. I heard the clatter of the laser pointer hitting the floor, followed by Liam's panicked shout, "Oliver Mork!" before the darkness swallowed me whole. I woke up to the jarring, rhythmic blare of a heart monitor and the harsh glare of fluorescent hospital lights. My mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and there was an IV needle securely taped to the back of my hand. I blinked against the brightness, trying to orient myself. The sterile, bleached scent told me I was back at Harborview. Heart rate is stabilizing, but his core temperature is 103.5. His CRP levels are off the charts, and his cortisol is critically depleted. A nurse's voice echoed near the foot of my bed. I told him 2 weeks ago it was an extreme stress response. Why was I paged for an ER admission? The rich, irritated baritone sent a shock wave of ice water through my veins. I forced my heavy eyelids open. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks stood at the end of my bed, reading a fresh chart. He looked just as immaculate as before, though the slight furrow in his brow betrayed a hint of genuine confusion. Because Dr. Brooks, a stern ER physician, replied, the paramedics noted his scent glands were emitting distress pheromones so potent they made the alpha EMTs nauseous. That's not anxiety. That's systemic biological failure. You're the endocrinologist. You need to look at his blood work. His body is attacking its own pheromone-binding proteins. Brooks went completely still. Slowly he lowered the chart. He walked to the side of my bed, his icy blue eyes locking onto my half-open, fever-glazed ones. For the first time, the arrogant mask cracked, revealing a flicker of intense medical alarm. "Mr. Rossi," he said, his voice dropping an octave, slipping into a low, soothing alpha register designed to calm panicked omegas. "Oliver, can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but only a pathetic, ragged breath escaped. The pain in my chest was blinding. Every beat of my heart felt like it was tearing a phantom tether. Brooks pulled a penlight from his pocket, but before using it, he reached out with his bare hand to check the inflamed gland on my neck. He didn't bother with a glove this time. The moment his skin made contact with mine, the universe seemed to halt. It wasn't just a jolt this time. It was a violent, magnetic snap. The agonizing, gnawing pain in my chest instantly dulled, replaced by a rush of warm, intoxicating relief that spread from the point of his touch outward. My erratic heartbeat immediately began to slow to a steady rhythm. The monitor beside my bed stopped its frantic blaring, settling into a calm, steady beep. I gasped, my eyes flying wide open. The sterile smell of the hospital vanished. Suddenly my senses were overwhelmed by the suffocating rich scent of winter pine, crushed cedar, and dark, smoky vetiver. It was the scent that had haunted my nightmares and fever dreams for 6 months. It was the scent of the dark room at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Brooks froze. His hand remained pressed against my neck, his fingers completely rigid. I could feel his pulse hammering wildly against my skin. "You," I choked out, tears instantly spilling over my eyelashes and streaking down my fever-flushed cheeks. I weakly raised my hand and grabbed his wrist. "It's you, the New Year's Eve gala, the blackout, the great Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, the most brilliant detached medical mind in Seattle, looked like he had just been struck by lightning." His icy eyes widened, the pupils blowing out until they were almost entirely black, a primal, involuntary alpha response to a recognized mate. He stared down at me, the color draining from his sharp face. "No." He whispered the word barely audible over the hum of the medical machinery. He yanked his hand back as if I had burned him. The instant he broke contact, the agonizing, tearing pain returned with tenfold ferocity. I arched off the hospital bed with a strangled cry, my hands clutching blindly at the empty air where his hand had been. The heart monitor immediately spiked back into a frantic, chaotic alarm. Dr. Brooks, the nurse yelled, rushing forward to hold me down. What happened? His vitals are crashing again. Brooks was stumbling backward, bumping into the stainless steel supply cart. He looked down at his own trembling hands, then up at the monitors, then finally at my agonizing, writhing form. The charts he held fluttered to the linoleum floor. He hadn't just misdiagnosed me. He hadn't just dismissed my pain. He was the alpha who had accidentally formed a deep, soul-level pheromone bond with me in the dark, and by walking away and remaining physically distant for 6 months, his absence had been slowly, methodically killing me. He was the cause of the fatal bond sickness he had sworn didn't exist. The chaos that erupted in the ICU was a blur of flashing red lights and shouting medical staff. My body was convulsing my nervous system, caught in a violent crossfire between the sudden, intoxicating taste of the alpha who marked me and the agonizing withdrawal of his immediate retreat. Through the haze of pain, I saw Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, frozen against the supply cart, his pristine facade shattered into 1,000,000 irreparable pieces. "Push 10 milligrams of diazepam now," shouted Dr. Preston Wright, the chief of medicine, who had rushed in upon hearing the code. "Brooks, what the hell did you do?" He was stabilizing. Nathaniel couldn't speak. The great arrogant genius was rendered mute by a biological reality he had spent his entire career denying. It took Nurse Abigail physically shoving past him to get to my IV line for him to snap out of his shock. "Out!" Nathaniel suddenly ordered, his voice no longer the crisp, detached baritone of a specialist, but the low, rumbling growl of a cornered alpha. "Everyone get out of this room." "Doctor," Wright whipped around, outraged. "Excuse me, he is coding, Nathaniel. We need to intubate." "I said, get out!" Nathaniel roared, the sheer force of his dominant pheromones slamming into the room like a physical shockwave. The air grew thick and heavy with the scent of aggressive winter pine. Even Dr. Wright, an alpha himself, instinctively took a step back, his eyes widening in submission to the sheer density of Nathaniel's aura. "It's a broken pheromone tether. Intubation will kill him. He needs his mate. Leave us." The medical staff scattered, the heavy ICU doors sliding shut behind them. We were alone. I was barely conscious, gasping for air like a fish thrown onto dry land, clutching my chest where the phantom tearing sensation was ripping my heart in two. Nathaniel crossed the room in 2 long strides. He didn't hesitate this time. He practically tore off his tailored suit jacket, throwing it to the floor, and climbed onto the edge of the narrow hospital bed. He pulled me into his arms, burying his face into the crook of my neck, pressing his nose directly against my inflamed scent gland. He wrapped his large, warm hands around my shivering frame, pulling me flush against his broad chest. "Breathe, Oliver," he whispered raggedly against my skin, his breath hot and desperate. "I'm here. I've got you. Just breathe in." He released a concentrated wave of soothing, nesting pheromones. It hit my system like an intravenous shot of liquid gold. The agonizing spasms in my muscles melted away instantly. The suffocating pain in my chest dissolved, replaced by a profound, overwhelming sense of safety and belonging. I buried my face into his pristine white dress shirt, inhaling the scent of cedar and smoky vetiver, sobbing uncontrollably as my erratic heart rate finally synchronized with his calm, steady rhythm. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. The monitors above us fell silent, displaying perfectly normal vitals. When I finally pulled back, slightly exhausted but pain-free, Nathaniel was staring down at me with an expression of profound devastation. The arrogance was gone. In its place was a guilt so heavy it seemed to physically age him. 6 months. he murmured, his voice cracking. "I let you suffer for 6 months. I looked you in the eye in my clinic, watched you beg for help, and I called you hysterical. You didn't know." I rasped, my throat raw. "But how? How did you not know it was me? How did you lose control at that gala?" Nathaniel closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against mine. "It was the hospital's charity event. Someone, a disgruntled former patient, we suspect, slipped a heavy dose of synthetic rut inducers into my champagne. I realized what was happening too late. I stumbled into a dark supply room to hide, to wait for security to bring suppressants. And then you walked in. You were in distress, smelling of vanilla and rain slipping into a suppressed heat. My instincts took over. I remember holding you, marking you with my scent. And then I blacked out. When I woke up in the infirmary hours later, they told me I had been found alone. I thought it was a fever dream. You practically doomed me." I whispered the resentment I had harbored for weeks, finally bubbling to the surface, despite the comforting warmth of his arms. "You told me to take an aspirin while my body was consuming itself." "I was a fool," he said, his blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I relied entirely on charts and data. I ignored the very nature of what we are. Oliver, your body, recognized me as its mate, and because I wasn't there to complete the bond, your immune system turned on you. I did this to you." The reality of our situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. My symptoms were gone, but only because he was holding me. "So what now?" I asked bitterly, pulling out of his embrace. The moment our skin lost contact, a dull ache sparked in my chest. I winced but held my ground. "Are you going to prescribe yourself to me a dose of Dr. Brooks twice a day to keep the Omega quiet?" Nathaniel flinched as if I had struck him. He slowly stood up, retrieving his discarded jacket. The professional mask tried to slip back into place, but it was crooked, broken. "I am going to take an indefinite leave of absence," he said, quietly, avoiding my gaze. "I will move you to my private estate in Mercer Island. You will have round-the-clock care. I will remain within proximity to ensure your immune system fully recovers. We will figure this out, Mr. Rossi. I promise you that." He was still doing it. He was treating me like a clinical trial. My heart broke all over again. He was offering me his presence to keep me alive, but he wasn't offering me him. The bond sickness wasn't just physical, it was emotional. And as he walked out of the room to sign the discharge papers, I knew that proximity alone wouldn't save me. It would only prolong the agony. The Mercer Island estate was a modern architectural marvel of glass and stone overlooking the cold, choppy waters of Lake Washington. It was beautiful, but it felt like a mausoleum. For 3 weeks, Nathaniel and I lived a tragic, choreographed dance. He was attentive, polite, and completely emotionally unavailable. He would sit beside me on the plush velvet sofa in the evenings, ensuring our shoulders touched, so the bond wouldn't flare up and cause me pain. He cooked nutrient-rich meals, monitored my blood work daily, and spoke to me in that calm, detached medical voice. But he slept in the guest wing. He never held my hand unless my heart rate spiked. He was a doctor, treating a terminal patient, refusing to acknowledge that the cure required him to be a mate. My body began to realize it was being tricked. The physical contact was enough to keep the acute bond sickness at bay, but the emotional rejection was slowly starving my inner Omega. I began to lose weight again. The dark circles under my eyes returned. The dull ache in my chest became a constant throbbing companion. I was dying of a broken heart, and no amount of proximity could fix it. The breaking point arrived on a stormy Friday night. The wind was howling off the lake, rattling the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. I was sitting by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, trembling violently. My temperature had spiked to 102 degrees in the last hour. Nathaniel rushed into the living room carrying his medical bag. His face was pale and tight with anxiety. "Oliver, your tracker shows a massive drop in white blood cells. I need to administer an IV of broad spectrum." "Stop!" I croaked, swatting his hand away as he reached for my arm. The effort cost me dearly. I slumped back against the cushions, gasping. "No more needles. No more charts." "Oliver, please." Nathaniel begged, his professional demeanor finally shattering completely. He dropped to his knees in front of the sofa, grabbing both of my hands. "You're slipping away again. I'm right here. I'm touching you. Why isn't it working?" "Because you don't want me." I sobbed, the tears flowing freely down my burning cheeks. I looked down into his terrified blue eyes. "You're an alpha who resents losing control. You resent that your biology tied you to me. You're doing your duty as a doctor, Nathaniel, but my body needs a mate. It knows you're holding back. It knows you don't love me." "That's not true," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Oliver, You won't even sleep in the same room as me." I cried out, the pain in my chest flaring so intensely my vision went black at the edges. "You're letting me die because you're too arrogant to surrender to the bond. If you don't want me, then leave. Let me go. The quick death is better than this slow torture." I yanked my hands out of his grip and tried to stand up. I wanted to run to escape the suffocating walls of his sterile mansion, but my legs betrayed me. I collapsed forward. I didn't hit the floor. Nathaniel caught me, dragging me against his chest with a desperate guttural sound that was purely animal. "I'm sorry," he wept, burying his face into my neck. The great Dr. Brooks was crying. I could feel his hot tears soaking the collar of my shirt. "I'm so sorry, Oliver. I was terrified. My whole life has been logic, science, and control. The moment I touched you in that hospital, I realized you were the only thing in this world that could destroy me. I was terrified of how much I needed you." He pulled me tighter, his pheromones exploding outward, no longer, just soothing but deeply possessive, raw and utterly devoted. "I am a fool, an arrogant, stupid fool," he choked out, rocking me back and forth. "I love you. I have dreamt of your scent every night since New Year's Eve. I don't want to be your doctor, Oliver. I want to be your alpha. I want to be yours." The sincerity in his voice, the complete shattering of his ego, resonated deep within my soul. My inner omega purred weakly, reaching out to the invisible thread that connected us. "Then claim me," I whispered, tilting my head to expose the inflamed, bruised scent gland on my neck. "Save me. Properly this time." Nathaniel didn't hesitate. His icy blue eyes were dark with primal instinct. He stroked my cheek with a trembling hand, reverently, before leaning down. His lips brushed against my skin, and then with a low growl his teeth sank deep into my scent gland. The pain was sharp for a fraction of a second, followed immediately by an explosion of pure, radiant light. It felt like 1,000 missing puzzle pieces snapping into place at once. A rush of blinding euphoria flooded my veins, washing away the fever, the ache and the hollow emptiness in my chest. The bond, frayed and dying for 6 months, snapped tight and solidified into an unbreakable steel cable. I gasped, arching into him, my hands gripping his broad shoulders as he released his claiming pheromones into my bloodstream. When he finally pulled back, he carefully licked the puncture wound, closed his eyes soft, and filled with a profound, quiet adoration. He scooped me up into his arms, carrying me not toward the sterile guest wing, but toward the master bedroom. "No more charts," Nathaniel whispered against my hair, as he laid me gently onto the massive bed, pulling the heavy duvet over us and wrapping his body around mine. No more running. I've got you, my beautiful Omega. I've got you. As I closed my eyes, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart against my back, the pain that had defined my life for half a year was completely gone. The arrogant doctor had finally been dismissed, leaving only the devoted Alpha who had saved my life by surrendering his own heart. And that is how the most arrogant doctor in Seattle became the most devoted Alpha, learning the hard way that you cannot outsmart biology, especially when it comes to true mates. Sometimes the only cure for a broken bond is surrendering your pride. If this emotional Omegaverse roller coaster kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your fellow drama lovers. See you in the next story.